It's the classic saying, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it.
So it's a really lame excuse for some people to just be horrible.
How can you teach a dog to do a Nazi salute?
People should not be bubble wrapped.
No.
We're bubble wrapped enough, I think.
I think that people are not very good with nuance and are very self-righteous about their opinions these days more than they used to be.
It's probably very important for our laws to take into account context and not to have blanket rules.
As long as those guys don't still stand by all those views and stuff, everyone's constantly obviously learning and growing.
Sometimes making fun of offensive things makes it easier to deal with.
Oh,
It's tough, right?
It's tough. It's so
hard
tough.
question.
Banishment. Just complete.
Desert island.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hiya, welcome to a new episode of Easy English. So today we wanted to tackle the philosophical idea of freedom of speech. We wanted to know if the people of Brighton feel that you should be able to express yourself in any way, and also if they think that the UK is a place that allows freedom of speech. Before we get started, if you're a fan of Easy English, then why don't you quickly subscribe below? Let's get started with this week's episode. Here we go. Do you believe in freedom of speech?
I think in essence, yes, I do.
In its essence?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah? You think you can just say whatever you like
Yeah.
without any restriction?
Sort of, not. Yeah, I mean, there's not 100%, but generally, yeah.
Do you both believe in the idea of freedom of speech?
Absolutely.
I do too.
I mean, it's fundamental.
Yes.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you?
I would like to, but I feel like people are so opinionated.
Do you believe you should be free to express yourself, whatever you say?
I think so, yeah. I think you're entitled to, whatever you want to say. I think there's just certain situations where maybe what you believe in, whether right or wrong, might not be the best thing to say, necessarily.
And how about you? Do you
I was
do you
going to say,
believe
because
in
everyone has the right to feel how they do about stuff. But obviously, I guess social standards kind of push different ideas.
Do you believe in the idea of freedom of speech?
Yeah,
Okay. And
in general.
In general. Okay, that's good. That's a good way to go. If you believe in it, how, in its entirety, that kind of means that everything's on the table. You can say whatever you like,
Yeah.
but then what's the nuances? Are there how would you restrict things? How do you sort of punish people if you believe in its entirety? Can you just go around saying racial slurs on the streets? How do you control that if you're allowing it?
I don't know. I kind of feel like in an ideal society, you'd have mutual respect for everyone.
Yeah.
So your free speech, it might be free speech behind closed doors, but you wouldn't say it to just anybody because you don't necessarily know what they believe in, if that makes sense.
So are you going down the road of people should be more educated?
Oh, 100% people should be more educated.
And that's how we combat these
Yeah.
issues?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
that's how you combat most issues, just education, respect as well. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely respect.
definitely
Yeah.
respect.
With this question, there are always little nuances. I believe in it, but.
Yeah.
So do you believe in the complete idea? People are free to just say whatever they want, express themselves in whatever they want, it's their opinion, or should there be, consequences?
Yeah. I mean, I think.
You go. You go.
I think it's often. It can be sort of the idea of freedom of speech can be really butchered in a sense. Just say some crazy sort of bigotry nonsense,
Abusing the power of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's a really lame excuse for some people to just be horrible.
Well, I suppose if you say things that are racist or homophobic or misogynistic, or you say things that might incite violence, at what point should people be sanctioned, and should that be litigated? Should there be should people be thrown in prison for what they say? I think most people would say in Western countries probably not.
Okay,
but,
so how do we do it then?
well, people can get cancelled, I suppose, on social media, and people's lives can be kind of torn apart. They can lose their jobs.
Is it a governmental punishment or is it a cultural punishment?
Probably more cultural.
Yeah, I'd say cultural.
Like what? Like social rejection or something?
Yeah. I think social reaction's a fair price to pay for
Okay.
for upsetting somebody.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
And so let's say this person screaming racial slurs, we should just let them do that and everyone just avoid him, don't listen to him, or how do you...
I don't know. It would be I don't know. I don't want to make anybody do anything really, to be honest. But
That's good.
they should be urged to maybe go to a class, or you know, I don't know. I don't want it to sound too totalitarian, but you kind of some people need to learn. You know, you can't just say anything you want to anybody.
Or there should be repercussions, but not governmental.
We advise you do this, or people are just not gonna. You're gonna be shunned from society, kind of.
How do you control this then? How do you control?
I don't know.
Say someone is using racial slurs. Should the government have rules in place, like you get locked up, have to be sued, or is there cultural?
I think it's more of a cultural thing rather than like a governed thing.
Okay.
But that's not necessarily how it should be, but it's kind of, I feel, how it is a lot
Yeah,
of the time.
definitely, yeah.
And what's the consequence then if you believe in complete freedom? Because I guess the opposite would be governmental restrictions, arrested, sued, la la la.
God,
Is that the route you want to go down? And if not, then what's the punishment then? Is it like a cultural punishment, like social culling, like rejection?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a cultural punishment. Like, well, you say what you want, and then people judge you on that, and it's free for them to judge you however they like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the problem comes when the freedom of speech directly harms a certain group of people or like certain part of society or something like that. When freedom of speech causes direct harm, like racism or sexism or misogyny, anything like that, then like homophobia, then it's not okay, and that's when it should have consequences, I think.
Okay, and what should be the...
Oh,
it's tough, right?
It's tough. It's
a
so
hard
tough.
question.
Banishment, just complete.
Desert island.
Yeah, absolutely.
This video is sponsored by Italki, the site that allows you to find online language teachers for one-on-one tutoring. As a new user, you'll get $10 in Italki credits after your first lesson if you register using the link go.italki.com/easy English. If you don't like reading complicated language books or listening to pre-recorded audio courses, then Italki is for you. You'll get to practice your conversational skills under different real-world scenarios, as speaking with humans is the best way to learn a language. You can customize your lessons to cater for your learning needs and interests, and the one-on-one lessons provide you undivided attention with teachers at your preferred time, whether you're at home, at the airport, or at your local park. You have complete access. So head on over to Italki with this link, go.italki.com/easy English to start your first lesson and get $10 in lesson credits. Do you feel like living in the UK you're free to express yourself completely?
Yeah,
and not
definitely.
just you, like, would you find it acceptable if someone was to sort of express their opinions which you wouldn't agree with? Is it okay?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, like, this country you're given more of an even platform, and there's spaces that you can talk about things more openly.
Yeah.
And like, we're definitely less oppressed than a lot of places around the world, so yeah, I think the UK is definitely a good place for that, for sure.
I mean, to a large degree, as in it's not legal, or, you know, there's obviously public debate that is very fierce these days, and but it does exist.
Do you feel like you are free to express yourself?
Yeah, I think I am, personally.
What, in speech or in general?
In any way, like with art, with
I think
speech?
so. I think it comes with like I don't know if obstacles is the right word, but it can sometimes feel difficult. But it's certainly not impossible.
But you're aware of like cultural like taboos that you shouldn't be doing. Okay.
Yeah.
With politics as well, depends what the majority is. You'll definitely be able to see it in how people tend to express themselves, I think.
Okay. But let's say you had, because like Brighton is like left-leaning. Would you feel nervous about like speaking your mind? Say if you had more right-wing views, not saying like far right, but like maybe more conservative opinions.
Yeah.
Do you feel free to express yourself in Brighton or in England? With
I think I do.
Okay.
But I think it depends where we are. Whenever I'm in Brighton, I feel free to express myself how I want.
Do you feel you can express yourself freely? I guess.
I mean, depends where I am in what context, but there's things I wouldn't say just for the peace Not that I've got any weird opinions, but do you know what I mean? Like, I think that people are not very good with nuance and are very self-righteous about their opinions these days more than they used to be.
I do think we are socialised into thinking we do have freedom of speech. Whether we necessarily have it is a different story, I think.
Yeah.
But we're all told that, I don't know, we all personally believe that we do to some extent, I think.
Yeah.
What do you do about things like art and expression? And I'm speaking from a sense of like retrospective stuff. Like recently, I just thought of in the news there's a thing about Monty Python at the moment, and there's a section of Life of Brian which is now kind of seen as a bit transphobic, right? Yeah. And they're talking of cutting this out.
Okay.
How do you feel about this? Should we leave art as it is, or should we edit it to our modern society?
I don't think it should be edited to modern society. People should, again, learn what it used to be like.
Yeah.
And if we don't want to go down that road again, then don't go down it. But I feel like history's happened. You can't just not.
Yeah. You can't just ignore things and rub it away. It's just there.
People shouldn't be bubble wrapped into a perfect world where
people should not be bubble wrapped.
No.
We're bubble wrapped enough, I think. To be honest, I really do.
I think that's really tough because obviously when it's from so long ago like that. Oh, it's tough.
Should you hide it, or should you show it and say?
Well, because things like that are obviously going to be dated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then that doesn't mean you just shouldn't. I don't know. I mean, I think about Roald Dahl. They took out some Roald Dahl stuff.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that was right because I think especially when it's kids' books.
Okay.
And it's, children nowadays don't need to be reading very old-fashioned words that wouldn't be used now at all.
Okay.
That's a separate example.
No, but it's a good example because it is still kind of censorship.
Yeah.
In a sense.
I guess when it comes to like actual like socialization of like especially young people, then maybe. But when it's like, sometimes it can be kind of an example of what is wrong and like what's not okay in society. Whereas if you take that out, then it's kind of like, oh, is anything acceptable?
As long as those guys don't still like stand by all those views and stuff, like everyone's constantly obviously learning and growing.
Yeah, it's like an evolution, isn't it? Like, and language is like an evolution as well. So like something that was spoken about back then that people didn't seem as like offensive or something definitely can be taken that way now. So I think like deleting it or getting rid of it and editing it isn't necessarily the right way, but giving it context and like letting people understand why people might find it offensive now or even back then, but people just didn't realise it's definitely the right thing. So it's more like education.
How do you feel about retrospective kind of censorship? If you know what I mean, like Roald Dahl, his books are being kind of rejected now. Monty Python, they're cutting a bit out of the movie now.
Yeah, I don't know really.
I think that's just like a feature of how like generationally like what's culturally acceptable has obviously it's not obviously changed, isn't it? Like sort of at least with like gender sort of obviously 50s and 60s and stuff, sort of women were looked down upon and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And obviously you can see that in sort of old movies, like they're treated very derogatory, but now it's obviously changed. Yeah.
So what should we do?
To counteract?
Do we hide the issue or do we show it and educate?
I think it's important to show it because otherwise you're forgetting about, like, it's the classic saying, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it.
Like, I don't think it's something we should promote to follow, but I think it's kind of a good life lesson to see how things have changed.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe for the better for some ways.
Yeah. Can you remember this guy in Scotland who he like taught his girlfriend's dog to do a Nazi salute?
To do it?
A Nazi salute.
Oh, someone taught their dog to do a Nazi...
No, not their dog, their girlfriend's, while she was away.
How can you teach a dog to do a Nazi salute?
And she came back and he sort of said the key word, probably something also to do with Nazism.
Yeah.
And the dog did it. And he got into like the criminal justice system from it.
Yeah.
He kind of more than cancelled. But he said it was a joke.
Yeah.
He still protests to the day that it's out of context. It was just a joke. It was a joke that kind of got taken out of context.
Yeah.
How does that work in terms of freedom of speech? How do you control that?
It is ridiculous, but there's sometimes making fun of offensive things makes it easier to deal with. Like,
I like this.
Do you know what I mean? That is one of the whole things about comedy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I've followed comedy since I was a little kid, and I just find it it's like therapy for the people that do it, and the people that are into certain comedians, they do it because it helps them feel better.
And diffuses words, diffuses
everything. Yeah, it makes you like diffusing is probably a good word. Yeah,
I think when you have those repercussions, it's definitely best to stay away. Like something that deep, like seated in history, is a bit like
awkward.
But very. It's like.
But for you, the answer is always education, cultural rejection, maybe, or.
Yeah, I think
so. Yeah.
It's good to be educated about it and know what you're saying.
I feel like you can still be punished in a way without going to prison. Like with certain things that aren't super. Like obviously, if something's like really extreme, like someone's abusing someone, like culturally or something, then that's obviously not good. But if it's something small, I do feel like they should have some kind of like punishment. Almost, but like more of like to make them feel bad that they've done it.
Like shaming, public shaming.
But that is almost that's like cancel culture, though, isn't it? It's like
so.
Public shaming on the internet. That's the sort of
It's like a whole other conversation.
Yeah, maybe not.
Online's another whole other world, isn't it?
I don't think it's a very healthy thing if one category is illegal and in another category that might be offensive and is completely legal. I think legal systems are very binary.
Yeah.
But in real life context, as you say, is everything.
Yeah.
And just because someone makes a joke about Nazism, or I don't know the case that you're referring to at all, but I suppose it's probably important for any law, like that man getting legal sanctions or whatever. It's probably very important for our laws to take into account context and not to have blanket rules, which I think for things like Nazi symbolism and stuff there has been in the past.
Yeah, okay.
But obviously there's plenty of other very offensive things that might not be illegal per se.
How do you feel about there's this new terminology like trigger words? Like, for example, there's an artist in Brighton called Ren, and he recently brought out a video called Suicide, and the lyrics are, he keeps saying this word, and people he had to change the lettering on YouTube because it was it didn't help his views, and he got all trigger warnings.
The word suicide.
Yeah.
Again, that's another one where you needs to be known about.
Does it make it easier or harder?
Don't sugarcoat that word. It's a serious matter, and it should be known about.
Yeah.
Like the more people that know about something like that, the better. It makes it easier for people to talk about it or going through that thing. There's no way the word suicide should be censored, in my opinion.
No.
Not at all.
For some things, I feel like we're like hiding it from us, but you're also hiding it from like younger generations, and it kind of feels like it's not free to be spoken about.
Okay.
But also at the same time, maybe it should be a trigger warning for some people. But I think it really depends on the situation.
Thanks for watching this week's episode. Please let us know in the comments below if you agree with the notion of freedom of speech, and if you feel that you have freedom of speech in your respective country. And as always, we'll see you next time. Ta-ra! So bloody windy!